Sweat Equity Podcast and streaming show, the number one business comedy podcast in the world. A little bit of a different intro. Sorry we didn't get one last week. I've been messing up our scheduling, but we will make it up to you by always providing value. But we'll make it up looking into some fun stuff in the future. So we'll make this intro very quick. This episode is sponsored by Zupyak, the first search optimized AI content writer. I've been using it. I don't like any of the other AI writers. They're not simple enough. It's a little bit too confusing. You sign up for the trial, you get boned on the subscription, and you go, I'm going to learn that. Zupyak, very easy. My dad could use it. That's how easy. Zupyak, it's hooking up SEO. I've been cranking out blog posts for clients with it. And if you go to zupyak.com, Zupyak.com, promo code SWEAT, as in Key Sweat, as in traded defensive end, Montez Sweat. You get the hookup. Holler if you hear me. That's Zupyak, Zupyak.com, promo code SWEAT. And this podcast was recorded a little bit ago and just couldn't get my shit together to get it up. It was an interesting conversation with my old pal that worked at Turo, Matheus? I should probably look that up. My old pal, Matheus Riolfi. It's a tough one. But we talk about scaling up, being married, and not making it work yet, but having someone that believes in you as a partner. Very cool, very interesting dude. So let's get this party started. I can't yell because I'm on the road in a hotel, so I'm gonna go, hotty toddy. Matthias, is that how you say it?
Matheus?
Matheus.
Yes.
Okay. It wouldn't be Sweat Equity Podcast if I didn't mess up something I'm supposed to read.
No, it's right. How are you?
I'm good. We get right into it. We're doing a little differently because of scheduling snafu on my part. So it's just you and I. My partner, I gotta stop saying partner, my business partner, my co-host, who's in the background. You can see him and I usually do it together. I always like to ask everybody, have you listened to the show before coming on?
Honest answer, no.
No, it's so funny to us that a lot of people, we get your bookers that are booking agents that, hey, this person wants to come on the show. Great. No one listens to it. So that's fantastic.
No, but I think it should, for the records and just so you don't feel bad, I think it kind of makes sense in a sense that like the audience of people who are listening to the show and getting benefit depending on how the show is structured, and the people they are kind of feature. Now it's very different. For example, I love this podcast called Owned that is about business owners. So the folks that are in the show definitely, or maybe never heard about the show, but it's still doesn't mean that it's not interesting. It's just that the audience maybe.
Hey, we only got like 430 episodes. Pretty hard to find. It's that was a really good PR spin. I like that. Yeah, no, I mean, we only ask because people that come on, they don't know what they're getting into a lot of the time, and we're not hardcore asking questions, but we do make it awkward very, very often like this. So we like to ask everybody that comes on for the first time this question, which may juxtapose against us being usually in tank tops and kind of silly. What advice would you ask your 13-year-old self?
So what advice
would you give your 13-year-old self?
Would you give? Okay.
I'm a little punchy today, so.
Yeah, no worries. What advice I would give my 13-year-old self is to have courage. Don't be afraid about failure, about doing things, about learning, about looking stupid sometimes. But that's when I was 13, I think was a lot more careful and worried about, I play tennis and I'm not sure if I should sign up for this competition because I may not win. I have this idea, but I'm not sure if it's going to work. Like right now, I think I'm a lot more like, yeah, just do it because it may be a terrible idea, it may be a good idea. And that's just one way to find out.
So you were 13 in Brazil
In Brazil, yes.
playing tennis and unsure what, it's kind of I bucket that answer underneath kind of the majority answers are like, get rid of the radio noise and whatever you're into, be into it. Were you kind of in a path that led you down from, I'm not sure what I'm doing to, oh, this is what I excel at? Or was it, I know that's kind of a leading question, but were you running?
No, I think I was in the path. I was in the path. So by the age 13, I had already started my first very small business with a friend selling calendars to the teachers in our school.
Really?
So I always knew I wanted to be a founder. I would end up starting my own things. So that piece, I think I was pretty much in the right path. Maybe at the time I had some athletic expectation. I mentioned tennis. Like I wish I could play Wimbledon or be a professional tennis player. Made that could have gotten me out of my founder path. But like professionally speaking, it's roughly the same. So yeah, I don't think to me was a changing path. It's more like maybe I would have gotten faster in places faster just because I would have taking risks faster, done more faster.
Well, so what kind of calendars are these? These sexy like fireman calendars? What are we talking about here?
No, talk about very boring like Christmas or whatever. So the backstory is like my dad traveled to the US. I was 10 years old. He brought one of those kind of HP DeskJet like ink printers, which at the time was very rare.
Oh,
and
yeah.
we may have
What year are we talking?
we're talking that was 1994.
Okay. Yeah. Yeah. The home printer is very rare. Yeah.
Home printer and color. So that's the thing. So my buddy and I were nerds geeking with computer at the time already. And we just created this like ways to do calendars, happy birthday cards, whatever. And we started to print that in regular paper and sell in our school to our teachers. I don't know if they bought it because they were like, feeling sorry about us. They would think they would break our hearts or whatever. But we sold quite a bit of money in that. And we spent our money like, buying magic cards, buying toys, buying video games or whatever things that 10-year-olds do.
So you feel entrepreneurial pretty much since the jump in a way.
Yes.
Now yeah. So I'm just imagining you going around, trying to hawk these calendars to teachers, and you think they felt bad for you more than anything. They probably had a calendar of some sort, maybe a planner.
Well, they did use the calendars. They did but so I think there was some customer value on that. But you're right, like you never know. And then that if it was just out of like, pity of us, or if it was really because they were excited. They were pretty, they were color again in a time where those are not obvious and easy things to find. But yeah, never know.
You remember what kind of paper? We talking nice paper? We talking printer paper? What are we doing?
Printer paper, like plain vanilla, normal printer paper that you fold in like fours, and then you have like some like yeah, it was nothing. Or some glossy paper sometimes we use, but again, nothing. They probably did not look professional as if you were to print in a print shop. That's for sure.
So you're talking to me from Vegas right now?
Yes.
And your plight brought you from I'm gonna butcher the small city you're from, Tabate.
That's right. It's a city, let's call it like 80 miles outside Sao Paulo.
Is that how you say it? Did I butcher it?
Well, you butcher a little bit. You would say Taubaté.
Tabate. Okay.
Yes.
Look, I can't read English, so trying anything Portuguese is going to be tough. And now you're currently living in Vegas, which is I want to get your input on how much you love Vegas.
I love Vegas, but I would put one caveat, we live in Summerlin, which is really deep in the suburbs.
Yep.
And it is like what, 15 miles away from the strip.
Yeah.
So it is a very different Vegas from what most people experience.
Yeah, it's like being in Henderson, right? Like
it's further than Henderson. It is
okay.
further than the strip than Henderson. So it's like Henderson, but even more suburbia, I would say.
What brought you over there? It seems if you're international coming in, you're usually staying in Vegas. What brought you to the outskirts of Vegas?
Well, because for us, like again, the backstory is my wife is also a founder of a startup, also remote. So we were both in the Bay Area, paying a lot of money for cost of living, very high taxes, like all the things they're not so great about California. California is amazing in many ways, and I love the Bay Area, it's chill. But it just didn't make sense for the time of our lives. There's a couple of founders with a daughter. We need more space. We need, better housing for cheap or cheaper, right, than the Bay Area. And that's kind of what brought us to Vegas. And then why the suburbs is because we want to still the suburb lifestyle, but it just wanted to be in a place with better weather and cheaper cost of living.
Yeah. I totally. I was just in Lake Tahoe, and I get why a lot of people from the Bay Area have a place in Reno for that reason as well. You think of Reno as what you were just talking about, like the Vegas Strip, and there's a part of Reno that's very fancy on the lake, and a lot of people choose to live there for the tax purposes. Look, I'll recruit you to Florida if you want. Florida's got good weather. Tampa's never been hit by a hurricane. We need all the good people. We need better imports into this state over here.
Yeah, I love Florida, so I'll be easily convinced. My wife a little bit harder, but one day, never know.
Well, tell me about Tent AI, and
so we help tech platforms create their embedded protection products. So think about when you go to Airbnb, even if you don't think about it as an user, you're purchasing insurance. So if you stay in a place and the place burns, you're covered. So many companies right now, so Airbnb, Uber, Apple, Tesla, they're starting to offer insurance products to their users because it's a much better experience for the consumers, and they can have a better business, make more money. And we power it all. So we help those companies structure and offer their own kind of protection or insurance products. And we provide all the technology, all the services, and all the kind of capital required. So we're really an end-to-end solution for those brands that are looking to offer insurance.
You're filling a necessary need in this kind of new, call it uninsured peer-to-peer kind of transactions. Is that fair to say?
Yes, this is one of our use cases, but it gets really everywhere. So if you think about, we work with a company called UShip, when you can ship stuff from anywhere in the US to anything from anywhere in the US. And you can ship your car from Tampa to San Francisco, and we work with them to provide shipping protection. So if your car gets damaged in transit, this insurance, this protection product will pay. So we're seeing shipping, there's a crypto. So it's really, what we're seeing is there's this wave called embedded insurance that you will really, if you think about it, in 10 years, customers should buy most of the insurance product, if not all, from the brands they love, the products they love, not from insurance companies directly. I think that's really what's going on here.
I didn't know that was the status quo. I didn't know that was.
Well, tell me the last time you bought insurance, and then tell me how much you like your insurer of your car, for example.
Well, I was on a mom-son lunch date earlier today, not bragging, but she was like, "Who do you have on the show?" And I was giving her kind of the info I've got on you. And I go, "Oof, insurance. This is gonna be a tough one." Because insurance, look, I hear a couple of words that I try not to zone out. I try to really focus.
But that's the point. You're not alone. Everybody, so there's no point of insurance companies trying to get you to love their brands, because frankly, you don't care and you shouldn't care. But if things goes wrong, you must be protected, because if you're not, you may be like in financial jeopardy, and like, all your kind of earnings and savings may be completely wiped out. So that's why insurance is so important, and capitalism doesn't work without it. But to your point, from a customer perspective, as much as it can disappear from your face and still give you the protection, that's what we're powering, and that's a transformation that is happening in the industry.
What made you get into this? I mean, it is, you just found a need and kind of hit it. Maybe it's not your passion, but maybe making this this necessary need kind of fruitful for the end user maybe is what's your why, I guess I should ask.
My why is like, if you work with it, again, it's very important, as I mentioned, like, people can have their financial lives completely ruined if something happened and they don't have protection. But then how I got into this is like, I was one of the early employees of Turo, the peer-to-peer car sharing company. So you rent other people's cars. So as you can imagine, insurance is it's a top of mind. If you're renting out your Porsche to a stranger, you want to make sure that that's very well covered. And the person driving the Porsche needs to make sure that he or she is covered as well, because if they get into an accident, they are off hundreds of thousands of dollars of damage, or if the car gets stolen or whatever. So that's what was my background before Taint. And that was when we kind of really stumbled upon the problem. I never thought about this problem in my life before until I joined this company and spent 80% of my time doing it. And surprisingly enough, like, I found it very fun, and my co-founder and I, because insurance, as boring as it is, and like behind the scenes, there's a lot of like, it's a data problem, and it's very like, you're trying to predict the future. You're trying to figure out how much people are gonna get in access in the future, so you price how much they should pay today. It can get very intellectually like stimulating, I would say. And again, as I mentioned, ultimately, it's a good product for consumers, that if we can make them purchase it without having to think as much, make it easier for them, we're making their lives better. And I think that gets me super excited as a founder.
Yeah, look, there's a lot of entities, a lot of startups, or you might be a disruptor in this kind of game. That it might not be sexy on the output, but that's where a lot of the opportunity lies when it's the unsexy things like this.
Yeah, and I would argue it's the same for pretty much every business. Like, do you think that Uber, if arguably went to the taxi business, like, that's not a sexy business? Like, Flexport doing shipping of containers around the world, not very sexy either. And they are, to your point, they are creating the industries, or recreating in a way that becomes sexy and exciting. But they always started with a very kind of big, non-sexy industry.
Well, I was early money on Turo as a traveling comic because, I think Uber was kind of sexy in the sense that I think the ones that really reach a lot of people are like, on a personal level, is like, why does this have to be this way? Like, rental cars still is a really terrible kind of industry. It's like, why is there a line every time I go to get a rental car still? Like, you should know exactly what's there. And then every time you go get a rental car, it's like, oh, we overbooked it. And it's like, you haven't figured this thing out yet.
Yeah.
You really haven't figured this out in what, 50 years of renting cars? Like, they haven't caught up to everything, which is insane. Turo has its own, sometimes issues. I suppose I've heard horror stories, but I'd still rather go with that. Same with Uber. I was fine with Uber when cities were trying to close it down across the country when they first really expanded. It's like, well, do you want to go in an unsafe car? Oh, you mean, do I want to go in the taxi with knife cuts in the plexiglass as a barrier between me and the driver and no seatbelts? Yeah, I think I'll take my ride with the person that has the incentive to drive safely, right?
Yeah.
And knows where they're going. Now it's swung a little bit to the other way, where I don't know the last time I've been in an Uber where they follow the GPS as they're supposed to do it. Like, they always mess it up. I'm like, how do you mess this up? How are you distracted? This is your only job. Anyway, so coming to America, you didn't have a lot of connections to get things going. Tell me about that plight.
Yeah, I definitely didn't. I came here, I didn't know I mean, honestly, I didn't know many people, but I went to business school, so that was almost like that was one of the reasons why I
Which
went to
ones? It
business
was a
school.
small business school, I believe. It was not really heard of. Which one
Yeah,
was
it's
it?
a small one, Harvard Business School,
Oh, yeah. Okay. Yeah, I've heard of that.
and um, then yeah, jokes apart, like it's definitely like I kind of met a lot of people there, and then that was kind of how I created my early connections. But even that wasn't enough, so I then joined Turo right after business school and spent 4 years at Turo. That's where I think I met a lot of more like professional tech based network. So, for example, Turo CEO, who was my former boss, Andrew Haddad, he was our first check at Tint. So he tried to, retain me, make sure I didn't leave for like 15 minutes or so. But then he's like, no, I know you. I know you should go. And by the way, he helped being the first check. So by the time I launched Tint 4 years after joining Turo, I had a lot of connections in the Valley. I knew folks that we could sell to, that I could recruit. And that made all the difference. I always tell founders that especially in the B2B world where you're selling to companies, you probably need some connections. And if you don't have, work for someone, work for some company to build them, because it's very hard to be successful without that.
What I mean that sounds like the American story that we should we should push out to everybody in other countries. Hey, don't worry. You work hard, you do what you're supposed to do, things will prosper. But that's not met without kind of any strife. Can you tell me about when you're trying to get this going? You know, it seems like what were the problems you initially hit with this? Because well, it might be a great idea and you might have some connections. You don't have all the big time connections, right? So it's like, how do you, I feel like I empathize with a lot of people out there. There's a lot of great ideas, most lack execution. It seems like you had execution, but how do you get to the right players you need to? How did that kind of all align?
Well, I think there's probably many, like it's a very complex answer, I would say, but I try to think about maybe simplify a bit. I think the reality is that, like, as any startup, like there's a very high rate of failure. And I mean, the odds are against you as a founder. The same way there is you are against us as a bit larger company now, but like it's the same. I think that like as founders, the way I see is like you should try to increase your profitability, your probability of success with as many things as you can. And then if you means like having other people who know and trust you, it's a first step that lets you get in the path where you could succeed. Does not mean you're going to succeed. Most people have people they know, they try, and it's not going to work out. But if they don't have that, then it's even harder, right? So that's what I'm trying to say. So, and I think again, in our case, our story is far from linear. There's a lot of ups and downs as any startup. We're far from being successful. So the jury is absolutely still out. But you're right, like at least the beginnings of the journey were a bit easier because we kind of put the right elements in place.
Yeah, was there and we're keeping this short because I have to run to go do our next podcast episode. So we'll wrap this up in a second. But I'm always curious about the fetal position move where you're in that mode where you're like, am I doing this right? What I call the fetal position. You get in the fetal position move where you're almost catatonic. You're like, am I really fucking up my new family that I have? I know your daughter's only 3, so this may happen way before. But was there a fetal position, scared, fearful moment you had with all of this, and how'd you get out of it?
I think you're always scared. Like taking the leap is incredibly hard. And especially if you have a high opportunity cost, right? So if you're in a job, if you have access to jobs that are very well paying, it's very hard to convince yourself that jumping to this no salary for unlimited time that it has a high probability of failing makes any sense. I think for me, like again, I put myself in a position after getting burned before in my career. I put myself in the right place after Turo, where I was like financially stable. So I knew my family wouldn't be in jeopardy, even if the things didn't work out. So I tried to de-risk as much as possible. And at the end of the day, it's like just taking the leap. Like going back to your early question, what I would tell my 13 years old, it's exactly what I did. It's like, just do it.
Yeah.
There's no right time. There's no right way. It's very hard. Odds are against you. But you know what? Worst case scenario, it's not going to work out. You go find a job. Probably you get a better job than you would otherwise because you learn a lot in the process. So that is how I rationalize this decision. But yeah, I don't know if it's that thinking works for everyone.
It sounds like you took a very pragmatic, not
Very
emotional.
pragmatic.
Yeah,
Very pragmatic.
And you got a ride or die chick as your wife, it sounds like. So that's good. As we say in the rap game, because I'm a huge rapper. I'm not. But I appreciate you coming on, man. We want to watch this story progress, so we'll have to get you back on later down the line, because especially with my co-host here to ping and pong off of you. Appreciate you coming on, partner.
Sounds good. Thank you very much for having me. Really appreciate it.
All right, get back to work, my
Cheers.
friend. See ya.